Hello, good evening, and welcome to APU Webinar Series 2020. Sorry for the delay due to some technical errors, so the time was delayed. Okay, let me introduce myself. I am Monil Ishwar from School of Marketing and Management (SOMM), and currently teaching tourism and service management modules. Uh, I am going to moderate this session, and this time, School of Marketing and Management proudly present a webinar with the topic of preparing a good research proposal by Associate Professor Dr. Lawrence. Right. So, without further ado, let me introduce the speaker of the day, Associate Professor Dr. Lawrence Arokisami. Currently, he is attached with APO as a lecturer. At the same time, he is the head of CIE, known as Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Uh, he has almost 18 years experience in this higher education, and more importantly, his research work has been cited and holding 720 citations, and H index is reached 13. So, uh, for today, we will have a very simple agenda. So Dr. Lawrence will do his presentation for about 45 minutes and followed by Q&A sessions. All right. So Dr. Lawrence, hi Dr. Lawrence. Good
Hi,
evening. Good evening.
good evening.
Okay, how are you?
Good.
Yes. So the due to the technical errors, so we had to start this webinar a bit late, but still we are on time. Okay, so you can start, Dr. Lawrence.
Thank you, our respected young scholar, Mr. Ishwar, for the good introduction about me. And and today's our topic is on preparing a good research proposal. That is my today's sharing. So this preparing research proposal is very important for the young scholars who are pursuing a master's degree or PhD degree or even preparing for research grants. So when you think about research proposal, if something is a very short and nutshell, you need to explain about what content and how you pursue your readers. That is very a key point here. So when you look at the first point for today's lessons is about uh, understanding the key areas of research proposal. Your research proposal must be very content, it must be very precise and explain the needs of the research proposal. Okay, so therefore, you need to understand what is meaning of research. Okay, probably most of you have read about all of the research books, methodology books, and you have identified many terminology or definition of research. Today, I want to give you a very brief, but one or two words can explain about research. When you look at the word researched, in the word research consists of two words, which we call re and searched. So when you speak these two, re and search, search means something you're exploring, searching and searching and searching. Re means stand for again. So when you think about research something is a continuity. It's not dropping from the sky. So it's something is what is already exist, what is already exist, but you are enhancing, you are exploring new concept, new methodology, new ideas, new innovative methods, style, and so on. So when you think about research is about continuity. That is the understanding of research. So don't think about you want to create something unique, something big, something new. Okay. So when understanding this research, the second point you need to understand the research philosophy. So what as a young scholars do is about academic research. So basically academic research consists of philosophical perspective. So when you think about research, research consists of three philosophical thinking, which first we call this ontology. Maybe most of you have heard about this. What is ontology? Ontology means something is reality. So when you speak about research, research speak about reality, what it really exists, what is really going on. Like today we'll look at the practice in Malaysia or probably the global issues about a pandemic. It's about real issues. We are not, nobody is going to fake this COVID-19. It's really existing and the damages you can see. So you need to pick a topic on something is really exists. Don't pick something is beyond your knowledge or something is not exist. So that is a first philosophical thinking you need to understand when you start exploring research and preparing a proposal. So ontology is the first point. The second philosophical thinking is epistemology. What is epistemology? Epistemology means acknowledged. When you say there's a problem exists, you need to prove with evidences. You need to prove with citations, literatures. So therefore, epistemology is a body of knowledge to prove that this problem really exists. So therefore, the second philosophical thinking that every young scholar need to identify literature review, evidences, proof, to prove that this problem really exists. The third philosophical thinking is a methodology. Methodology is the tools or technique that will used by the scholars or researchers to prove that this problem really exists and these are the solutions. So these are three key philosophical thinking you need to address in the research proposal. Okay, so when you think about research proposal, it's not about writing about 50 pages or 60 pages. It must be about 8 to 10 pages. Very clearly identify your research problem, your title, your introduction, your researchers, your underpinning theory, and methodology. So that is the key. So after you understand the three philosophical thinking, the next is writing a good research proposal. So I have an approach called timer. It's not a time bomb. It's a timer approach where we start with the title, we start with introductions, then we have a methodology, and we have the expected outcomes, and finally is a references. So when you look at this approach, when you look at the first one is about title. So being a young scholars, you always have a problem of articulating a clear research title. And of course, when you start exploring writing a good title, it will take times. You know, when you set the first title, after that you amend and continually until you get the clear title. Okay, so the title you need to reflect a little research problem. What you are called your central issues or central research problem that you want to do a research. For example, today we can see pandemic, world pandemic is about COVID-19. So we just look into these are the central issues, the central problem. So try to relate the central issue into your title. Your title must be concise and precise on explaining about the central problem or the current issues, or probably we call research problem. So that is how you need to precise on the title. When your title is something and your research problem something is not coherent, then therefore it's not a good research title. And my professor taught me a research method. She always request write a title that really excite you to explore. Otherwise, your title become very mundane and become very normal, and it's not exciting. Take example, class. There's just many topics that I explore, and there's a few topics that really excite me to know what is meaning and what is the research problem. With the title itself, when I'm reading about a few titles, the one title really sparked my mind was Internet Addiction. When I see the title Internet Addictions, quickly I learned to know what was the content of the study, what was the research problem. The word itself sparked interest among young scholars. So, class, when you write a good title, try to think deeply, come up with a very exciting title. So that is where the first point or first understanding about research proposal. Research proposal must have a very nicer, or probably I could say is an exciting title. So that is the first uh, uh, point for the today's research proposal. So when you start research proposal, think about the title. The title must be very clear, precise, and concise, and really eating the point. The second is point is about understanding the research introductions. When you think about research introductions, every when you read about many articles, the introductions may have a different points or concept. But remember that when you prepare research proposal they have a motive, objective. Probably you want to apply for grant, probably you want to apply for postgraduate admissions, or probably you want to write for the PhD research proposal. When you have a certain objective, therefore you must explain the introductions. What is your central research problem? And your introductions need to elaborate about your research problem and what are the significant, the importance of this research. So in the writing introductions takes about 6 to 8 paragraphs. You need to articulate what is uh, your central issues and how it relate to the contribution to the body of knowledge, and also link to the practice. So give a kind of excitement in your introductions. So that is a second way, so we can say a second point where the introduction is we must have a very exciting, and you must have a clear direction so it attract the readers to read and understand. So that's introductions. So when you have the introductions will lead you to the research problem. What is your research problems? Plus, if I ask many young scholars who are doing PhD or masters or even submitting a research grant, defining a research problem is the most difficult task. Do you agree? I think most of you will agree, especially young scholars. So when I was doing my PhD, so my professor taught me defining a research problem. She always reminds me that defining a research problem is the most difficult task. And it takes about 50% of your work. And if you can define your clear, precise research problem, meaning that 50% of your PhD or your research is already completed. The remaining 50% is only the literature, methodology, data collection, and all this. If you don't believe, there's another scholars who are known in this world is Sir Albert Einstein. He has said the same thing. In one of the conferences, he was invited and given a problem to solve. So he was given one problem and he was given about 60 minutes to solve the problem. So Albert Einstein is one of the thinker, one of the best intelligent men. For him, he can solve the problem instantly. But he itself said that defining a research problem is the most difficult task. And for his case, he took about 15 minutes to define the research problem, and he solved the problem within 10 minutes. That is what Albert Einstein said. So when you relate these two incidents, defining a research problem is most difficult. Even when you ask any corporate leaders or any issues in the country, in the organization, or even a family, defining a research problem is most difficult. I give you a case class. I give you a scenario. Sales drop in the organization, is it a problem? People leaving from the company, is it a problem? And many organizations making a conclusion, people leaves the company or high turnover the company or sales drop in the company is a problem. It is not a problem. It's a symptoms. Why people leaving? It's a symptom. Why sales drop in the company? It's a symptoms. So by right, a good researcher need to identify the root cause of the sales drop, root cause of the people leaving from the company. So when you look at all the studies, people leave the company because of the superiors, because of the system, and so many other factors. So leaving organization or sales drop in a company is not a problem, it's a symptom. Okay, this is where you need to identify the clear research problem and do a very narrative way of writing a research problem clearly about what is a research problem. I give another scenario, another situation class. This is one of the French professor. Okay, being a French professor, especially in social sciences, you're not required to go to universities. You can do a research anywhere. Therefore, one of his job was send his wife to workplace every morning and fetch her and every late evening. That is one of his practice, or could be his one of his routine job. So when he sent his wife every day and fetched her, this professor have found a kind of pattern at a workplace. The pattern is about all the married men and the single women work late. Work late. That means they work until 6, 7, 8 something. And all the single men and all the married women will leave on time. So when you check this pattern was exists in the French organizations, you also want to check with other countries like Germany, Chile, and all other countries, including Malaysia. So you found that the same pattern exists. Class, I ask you, is it true that all the married men and single women will work late? If you don't trust me, after work, you go and check, and all the organization, all the married men will work. So what you understand with this? So this pattern was just a symptom. The pattern was just symptoms. So as a good researcher, you need to identify what was the root cause of these symptoms. So when I check all the research proposal, especially master's degree, PhD, or grant, I find there's a lack of identify the root cause of the symptom. Rather than this, the students are really reflecting the symptoms become a problem. So when you write a good research proposal, please remember that writing a research proposal or research problem, you need to highlight about the root cause of the problem. It's not a symptom. Today, you ask any organization, there's a huge sales drop in every companies, and everybody knows because of COVID. This is what we call a research problem. Okay, so this is where you need to explore and identify the clear research problem. So, class, when you think about writing a good research proposal, the research problems gives you a very clear indication and directions and what the purpose you want to do. So this is what you need to answer. So that is where the research problems comes in. After you identify research problem, the next level is to create a good research question and objective. Again, many students or young scholars not clear what was the research question. Research question is something hunches you want to explore and you want to solve. That's why we have what, why, how. This kind of hunches you need to create. When you see this is a problem, let's say, for example, sales drop in the companies and because of COVID-19. Okay, we know this is the problem. We know this is the root cause. But the next hunches is what you want to answer. What was your research question? Which part you want to handle? Because the research question gives you a boundary, a clear direction, a scope. So that gives you a very clear research question. So when you want to create a good research question, there's a one formula called funnel approach. Funnel approach means something is a funnel. So you know the research problem is a very broad, and you know what are the evidences, what are the problems. Then try to come up with a clear research question to answer the research problem. To answer the research problem, one or two research questions is good enough to answer the research problem. So this is when the research question is very important. So whether you're doing a quantitative study or qualitative studies, we require to have a good research questions. That research question will give you a differences or a distinguish between past studies. So when you come out with a research question, you need to understand whether this research question has been answered by the previous studies by a previous scholars. So therefore, your literature is very important. So by understanding a research question, the next step is you need to derive your research objective from your research questions, meaning that your research question and research objective should be parallel, must be consistent. I've seen a many research proposal where the research question is asking something and research objective is something, and automatically your research proposal will be kicked out or unsuccessful. So class, so for the young scholars, when you develop a good research question from your research problem, you need to have the derive your research objectives through from your research questions. So that is the first part of, after the title, the second step is introductions. So under the introduction, you have introductions, research problem, research question, and objective. So the BOD answer for the T, BOD answer for I. So we go to the methodology. And before you go to the methodology, you have another component that every research proposal required to see what are the past studies, what are the past literatures has been covered, has been answered. Therefore, a literature, a conceptual framework is very important for for your research proposal. Because when you come up with your title, when you come up with a research problem, you're able to justify, able to prove that your research problem, your research question is the current issues. And if nobody have studied, nobody have done a good research on that area. Therefore, literature review will gives you a clear directions. Okay. Another school of thought or another way of understanding literatures, every young scholars will have a difficulty to identify which is a literature review, which one is my literature review. So what is my boundary? Where is my literature reviews goes? To answer this class, you go back to your research question. Your research question should be answered in your literatures. In the literatures. So when you write your literatures with the variables, with underpinning theories, whichever, these literatures should answer your research question. So that is the boundary, that's a limitation. So that is a literatures. So when you create literatures, your literatures should be concisely explained about, you have to cite the issues. Let's say doing a research on internet addictions, example. So you must find a citation who have studied about internet addictions. Then you should have something compare and contrast about the past studies, whether the methodologically is differences or the concept, the theory they use, each scholars or each article. So each article will have their own literatures, own boundaries, own methodology, own findings. So you should read and understand, and you should relate to your literatures how this literature is a contrast or compare with your studies. And you also must think about what are the critical values you can add on to your literatures. Whether the old literature is still relevant or not relevant. So this kind of sharing of thoughts should be clearly defined. And you try to connect all your literatures into your research problem. How your literatures connecting to your research problem. Plus, when I see a most of research proposal, they fail to connect to the research problem. They fail to critique the literatures. So this is where the young scholars need to understand the literature component and also identify what are the underpinning theories, the important theories you need to highlight in your proposal, because the theories is a fundamental to argue the entire research problem. So after you identify literatures, the following will be your methodology, your method. So we come to method. Basically, different scholars will have a different thoughts, different perceptions. So they have a two school of thoughts. One is some school will argue that literatures is a heart of the research, a body of knowledge. And some school of thoughts come from the methodology. They say methodology is the heart of the studies. So I come from the second school of thought where methodology is the heart of the research. Plus, when you see a human being, how important the heart. The moment heart stops, you are collapsed, you are gone. Similarly, that how important is your research methodology. Your research methodology is your recipe of your design. How you want to make a design of our output, then what you expected outcome. If you don't have a clear methodology, you cannot derive a clear expected outcome for your studies. So many young scholars, when they write a research proposal, they fail to understand what method they should use, and from the method what kind of you can derive an outcome, the connections. So when you think about research methodology, it's basically about design. What is your design? What is your boundary? What is your total populations? What is your sample size? Who is your cohort? Because when you talk about internet addiction is a very general concept. But along the way, you should focus to whether it's internet addiction among teenagers or young adults, or probably a school students or university students, the cohort. So therefore, in the methodology, you have to precisely describe your population, your sample, and what is the expected outcome from your methodology. And what is your research design? Research design is very important component in the defining research problem. My professor who taught me research method, she always refer research design as a recipe. You know what a recipe about? When you cook, of course, every individual have a different recipe. You go to the Chinese restaurant, they have the Chinese recipe. You go to the Indian restaurant, they have an Indian recipe. So recipe makes the different outcome, different taste. Therefore, you need to identify what is your research design for your studies. Your research design should be put it in the diagram so that you can derive the outcome of your studies. So many young scholars have failed to understand this diagram. When you write a good proposal, because it's only what they call about 8 to 10 pages of your research work. So therefore, you must be very precise what is your design and how this design can lead to outcome of your studies. So these are the methodology component. So after you understand the methodology component, the next will be expected outcomes. In every research proposal, we expect you to write at least one page to probably about at least about 3 to 4 paragraph about what is expected outcome of these studies. Then only you can be persuasive. You can influence your readers, whether is a grant proposal or even the master's proposal or PhD proposal. You must have a persuasive method to pursue them. Hey, this study is very important, and this proposal gives you a very insightful message about the outcome of the research. So you must have some expected outcome where you clearly define who is going to benefit, what is your contribution to literatures, what is the uniqueness in your studies, how is your research problem is unique. So when you relate all these, your expected outcome become something is exciting the readers to say, hey, this is a very good topic, a very good research. That's all. So that is what we call expected outcome. So after you have expected outcome, then the next is about the references. The R. The references for good research proposal should have at least 10 to 15 references. So references is must adopted from the good journal. Don't take from the ordinary journal of below quality, or I don't say the below quality, ordinary journal. So when you cite your works, especially your literatures, in your research problems, you need to quote from the good research or journals. For example, Emerald. For social sciences and management humanities, I think Emerald is like a godfather. Then we can go for the next level is like a Searched and Taylor's and Franchise. These are the good search engine where you can adopt a good theories, good argument, good literatures, good research problem, and the references should reflect you are taken your entire research problem from a good journal. Plus, I've seen some of the professors when they come and assess your proposal or even your PhD thesis. The first thing they look at the references, not your research problem or your title. I've seen. So they look at the references, they check on references, where they got all these literatures, knowledge, and informations. The references will tell you that whether this proposal or thesis is a good, outstanding, or a poor, or maybe a mediocre. So when you start writing about literatures, methodology, try to quote a good references. That is a tips. So when you write a good proposal using a timer approach, where start with a clear title, then you have a clear introductions, research problem, research question, research objective. After that, you move on to the literatures and the clear methodology. Then you have the clear expected outcomes, and finally is your references. These are the key subtopics or component required for any good research proposal. On top of that, you want to add on the research significance, research scope, limitations. You can add on. But these are the fundamental key component must exist in any research proposal, especially for the young scholars who start writing about research proposal. They need to expose with these subtopics. Plus, my experience in evaluating research proposal, assessing research grant, assessing theses. We look at from the title, how the title brings you a good impact to the studies, especially social sciences research. The title must be very attractive and attract the readers. The second about research problem, the research question objective, and what this study is going to be contributing research significant, and your conceptual framework, your underpinning theories, your methodology. These are the key issues. So that's why, class, I always remind my students, proposal defense is most important than Viva. Viva is a final stage where you have a last question. This is only about a kind of confirming your research. But proposal defense is where you need to identify entire scope clearly. So my professors always tells me that a research means something is from unclear to clear. Remember this word, from unclear to clear. So when someone reading your proposal or thesis, whatever write-up on research, they're able to crystal clearly understand your work. If you read, you're confused, you don't understand. Therefore, that is not a good research proposal. That is simple rule of thumb, from unclear to clear. Whether it's a research proposal or thesis or even an article, even a research journal, conference papers, is about make things from unclear to clear. That is the researcher's job. And of course, you're able to solve the problem. Okay, so with this, I can conclude on today's sharing about writing a good research proposal consists of 5 elements: a clear title, the second is introductions and research question objective, and third is about writing the literatures and your methodology, fourth is about expected outcome, and the last one is your references. So references must reflect you have taken from the good journal. Okay, so when you have these 5 elements, your research proposal will be very clear, very concise, very precise, and chances to reject your work or unsuccessful will be less and less and less. Okay, that is my today's sharing. So now we can I pass to the moderator for the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Lawrence. It was a very useful and also very insightful presentation, which is really important and also useful for those who just started their PG studies, and also for those who want to really get into this research world. All right. So there are a few questions from the viewers. All right. Let me just, yes. So the question is, hi Professor, is there a method to identify a good journal or ordinary journal to minimize the time on reading unreliable journals? Okay. So please, can you answer for this question?
Thank you, Kevin Liu. Um, I I would like to share about what are the good journals, but I don't want to share what are the bad journals. I don't want to have the differences. Okay, the good journals are for social sciences, for humanities, always from the Taylors and Francis Online, Search, Willy, and Emerald. These are the four. So Ibico or Heavy Host, ProQuest, try to sideline. That one you can use as secondary. So the most important is Francis and Taylors, Emerald, and Willy, and also Searched. Okay, that's a good one. Am I answer your question, Kevin?
So another second question is from Abhi Jain.
Yeah. For second question is from Abhi Jain. Um, Sir, if one is doing his research where he can't find much database in Emerald or Taylor's franchise, so again is related with journal and also articles where they can find their uh, literatures.
I don't understand your questions. Um, what Heavy Jane is trying to say is, beside all these database, let's say you couldn't find a good resources, what are the other options you have? Um, the other option is, of course, you can refer to other journals like ProQuest, EB Host, and all these. But when you come to the central argument of your research problem, your literatures, developing underpinning theories, I always advise my student to use all the renowned journals like Emerald and Francis and Taylors and all this. Okay, that is my always request for my students, because when you go for Viva, your professors or examining your work will criticize all your models and your literatures if you're taken from the ordinary journals. Okay, they will always have a question: why you taken from these theories and this journal? Why not from these journals? Okay, to avoid these, try to find a good journals, and you can develop your argument.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. And another question is from Sylvia Singh. Okay, so she asks about my university require proposal within 5 pages. It is not enough for me to present ideas. What can I do?
Okay. So of course, 5 pages is very limited. Okay, I always propose for at least 8 to 10 pages. It's a good research proposal where you can articulate your entire thoughts and ideas, and you can prove that your ideas is relevant and is very important to do a conduct a research. Okay, Sylvia, probably you can send 8 pages or 10 pages. They won't reject your work. Don't worry. They don't say because you exceed the pages, we are going to reject your proposal. No university will reject that. Okay, only thing probably they have the limitation of time or resources to assess your proposal. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Prof. Another question is from, uh, yeah. So, with all your recommendation on researching, would you recommend using Wikipedia?
Oh. Okay, in the literatures or in the research methodology, there's one component we call data collections. Under the data collection, there are 3 components. One is what we call primary data. So primary data means first hand. Okay, primary data means like your first wife. Okay, take example like first wife. Secondary data means your second wife. Okay. Third means Wikipedia. We call these a tertiary data. Tertiary data. That means anyone can amend, anyone can change. So for certain citation, for example, defining a research problem and definitions, I always advise my student don't use Wikipedia or tertiary informations. Don't. It's very unhealthy. Okay, because Wikipedia is not a reliable source. Probably you want to put in the introductions, in one of the sentences you say according to Wikipedia, so fine, I accept. But come to defining the research problem or your underpinning theory, don't use any Wikipedia sources because it's not reliable informations.
Right. Thank you, Prof. Thank you. I think you already answered almost the few questions that been asked from the viewers. And I have one question with you. Uh, can you explain about scenario gaps and also research gaps that we're going to write in the research problem?
So I research gap and scenario gap. So for the because I'm come from the management school and we are more on research gap because we want the research gap from the literatures. Scenario gap is more to the practical situation, practical scenario. What are the difference? So we can see today. Last time we have old norms. Now we have a new norms. The future are going to be next norms. So old, new, and next. So when you have these terms, so this we call like scenario gap, the differences. But for a good research, we need a research gap from the literatures. So these are the literatures already answered by the past researchers and scholars. But what are the new thing you want to explore? That it should be your research focused. Okay. Am I answer your research your question? The young
Yes, Prof. Yes.
all these.
Yes, definitely you answer my question. Thank you very much. And there is another question from Shanta. Let me. For exploratory type researches, finding the previous literature review is a big challenge. How we design a proposal for exploratory type research?
Okay. It's a very technical and it's a very good question. So basically, when you look at the research, there are 3 types of research in the quantitative techniques. The first we call exploratory. That means you're exploring the issues and is something new exists in the body of knowledge or probably in the research problem. The second is a descriptive, described. Okay. The third one we call explanatory. So there are three types, or we can see 3 levels. Basically, exploratory research is something is very, very new in the industry, or probably in the market, or probably in the phenomena or in the issues. Probably take example like COVID-19, something new. So something new exists, and everybody we are starting over and over. Okay, so finding a previous literatures is very, very limited, and you don't find many articles has been written on COVID-19. So even I think last week I was working on certain topics. When I see about the COVID-19, I found about 6 to 7 articles which already published in the May and June and July 2020. So within the 3 months, they are about 5 or 6. So that is always a problem. So for you to design a good research proposal, you need to think about what is the present and try to relate the future. Because explore. We don't have a very confined literatures to prove, but you can predict, you can say this will happen. So therefore, you can have a design, a proposal which more on current and the future. We cannot depend on the past. Okay, so that is my advice for the exploratory research type.
All right, doctor. So another question from Imtiaz. How do we choose between quantitative and qualitative research based on literature?
Okay, I think there's a little confusions on understanding what's a quantity and quality and also literatures. How do we choose between on literatures? Okay, so first let me explain what is a quantitative and qualitative. Quantity and quality is approached, the method that you use to understand the issues and run the analysis. If you're using a quantitative method, it's going to be very on interview, survey and collect data, and you analyze the data, and you're going to present the data presentation. It's more on statistical tools. Qualitative, basically, they don't use numbers. They're more on words, okay, logical interpretations. Okay, so when you look at the literatures, when you take any articles, when you see some of the article supported with analysis, that means they have numbers. Therefore, that is a quantitative research. If you see something is a very conceptually explained without any data, they have interview, interpret the terms or understand the concept. Therefore, that will be a qualitative literatures. So when you want to use for your studies, you can use both. Let's say I'm doing a quantitative studies. I can take literatures from qualitative, I can use. Doesn't mean the qualitative literatures is not suit for the quantitative. Can. Similarly, when you're doing a qualitative literatures, you also can take literatures from quantitative studies to prove. Can. Okay, so I hope I answer your questions. Even though your question is a bit, I really explained from the quality literatures and also the application part.
All right, Prof. Another question from Zilong Tan. Does all R&D department of companies rely on the research proposal heavily?
R&D departments of companies. Okay, companies, I'm not really sure. Okay, my experience in assessing research proposal in the faculty level, in the university level, even the ministry level. So when you think about proposal, it's very important because you're proposing idea and you must pursue your readers to grant a grant. Probably like what you say is from the companies. The companies have a problem and you're proposing a research proposal. Of course, if the company want to give you a grant or research funding, they have to look at the research proposal, how realistic your research proposal, how reliable, and how we can complete and how logical your research proposal. If it is not logical, it's beyond your knowledge, we cannot grant you grant or financial fundings. So I believe whether it's a universities or university or ministry or even a companies, if they want to give a grant or something, a research funding, the research proposal must be clearly and concise explain about the needs and the expected outcome of the research proposal.
All right, Prof. So another question from Kevin. It's about to create an attractive title, technical or professional terms is a bit hard to make the project attractive. Is there a way to find balance between too technical or boring?
I think Calvin comes from the technical professions, I think so. Okay, for social sciences, of course, when you see the title, and many people would like to have jargon words. Jargon words is something is beyond your knowledge. Something is a technical words to attract people. That is why most of the studies will have latitude studies or lateral studies. I think all these attractive or bombastic or can say jargon words. So that's one way of attracting people using a jargon words. Okay, I think lately I saw a title where it's I don't even understand the sentence. I mean the word. So I need to refer to the dictionary. And what is this word reflect on this title? So this is one way to attract people. Okay, it's possible.
All right, Prof. Another question from Vignesha. This is a long question actually. Does my paper have to solve a problem? Okay, what if my methodology translated to something that where I figured eventually by validation that it doesn't solve problem? So you have to answer this question, Prof.
First, I need to understand the question. Prof, does my paper have to solve the problem? Okay, every research paper should address the problem, and of course, when you run a quantitative or qualitative, you have the findings to solve the problem. Okay, what if my methodology translated to something where I figure out eventually by validations that it does not solve problem? Can that be useful too? Is the paper on what approach should not be taken to solve a particular problem? I don't know whether the right words to use validations or significance. Plus, when you run a quantitative studies, okay, when you have to create a conceptual framework, then you have a research framework, then you run the analysis, and finally we come up with a Crawback alpha, and we have the significant power values, whether rejected, not rejected. So young researchers always think that the power value must be less than 0.05, then my variable must be significant and must be accepted, cannot be rejected. If one or two variable has been rejected, is it a finding? This is a finding. Plus, you look at a scientific research, whether it's a biology or probably chemistry or physics, all these lab works, there are many of thousands of research experiment was failed and has given a PhD because they prove that these are the way if you do will be failed, and there's also finding in the science. So we come to the social scientists, social sciences work. If let's say you have about 8 or 9 variables, out of 8 or 9 variables, let's say 4 or 3 is rejected, also a finding, you can report it. Maybe another country, it may be significant. But in our country, we are culturally different. We have different principle, different school of thoughts. Therefore, it may be significant. So whether it's not significant or not significant, you can report it and it's valid. Accept it. Don't think that is all the rejected one is your study is failed or study is not answer your research problem. As long you can justify all the rejected hypotheses with the literatures and to prove that this is also a finding for our studies. And the continuous studies from the other researcher will quote you that according to these studies, this variable has been failed, not significant. It's a possible. So don't worry about whether your variable is wrong or probably not significant. Don't worry. Report as it is.
Yes, Prof. Related with that question, so there is another question from Shamini. When the same type of research conducted in another country and I want to research about it in Malaysia, is that a problem of not being a pioneer research?
Okay. In research, these are the dialogue or probably I could say it's like debates going on in many scholars, But you will think about research, something you're adding values. So if there's some research already conducted in another country, and you're replicating, this we call replicate research. When you're replicating, it's not going to add value. So therefore, it's not a good research. Let's say you especially go for PhD level, if you want to replicate research, it's not accepted. It's not. Maybe the master's level or probably, you can but not in the PhD level. Okay, it's very unhealthy and very unethical.
Yes. Thank you, Prof. Okay, again and again, the same question from literature side. Okay, let me pose the question. What the difference between theoretical analysis and literature review?
Literature review is basically is a past evidences, past findings, past argument. All these are literatures. Theoretical framework, I believe, is a theoretical framework or underpinning theories. Underpinning theory is what are the theories that the past studies have used, and what theory you're going to use to support your variables. Take example, is one of your variable is satisfactions. Satisfactions means what? It's how satisfied, or probably a job engagement, variable called job engagement. You must find in what level people were engaged. So from what theory you can prove that people are engaged. Therefore, motivation theory comes in. The motivation Maslow hierarchy says, if you feel the self-actualization, self-esteem, people will highly engaged. When you give a respect, when you give a recognitions, people will. So we try to relate the variable from the theory, the theory to support your each variables. So this we call a theoretical analysis or underpinning theories or theoretical framework. I hope I answer your question.
All right, Prof. And I think this is the last but not least, the question from Jessul. Okay, how to write an effective research proposal for PhD?
Okay, good question. So my professor taught me research. She always reminds me research means only one. There's no difference with undergraduate research, master's research, PhD research. To answer this question, I would like to read one example. Let's say you're cooking, okay, you're preparing food. Let's say you're only preparing for 2 people. That means you and your husband, or you and your wife. Another situation, you're cooking for 20 people. Another situation, you're cooking for 200 people. So 220, 200. Basically, I'm referring undergraduate, masters, and PhD. Because you're cooking for 2 people, can you compromise on the taste or ingredients? Never. Because even you cook for 2 people, the taste must be good, the ingredient must be suitable to fit to 2 people. Even for 20 people, when you cook, you must provide a good ingredients, and at the end of the day, the taste must be good. You won't compromise, yes? Similarly, when you want to cook for 200 people. So research means only one. Whether it's an undergraduate, master's, or PhD, you must have a clear research problem. As I said, the effective research proposal is I use a timer approach just now. You can use that timer approach for undergraduate thesis, master's thesis, or PhD thesis, or even for the research grant proposal. Any level, that is how you can have a very effective research proposal. So don't compromise on can you dilute your research problem for undergraduate? No, research means research. Whichever levels, remain one.
All right, Prof. So just now I mentioned about no, this is the last question, but we can go for another question. Is it okay? Okay, Prof, for you? Is it okay?
No worries.
All right.
10.
Okay. So this is the question, and it's about can the title of research can be changed a bit during the research, because while studying a topic sometimes you find different angle towards the problem which is more interesting to you.
Aziza, I think in my entire life, I didn't see anyone who started the title and then finish the same title in the end. Never. Along the way, everyone will change the title according when you progress in your research work. So no arms, you're changing your title. No worries.
So I I think Prof already answered almost all your questions, viewers. Thank you very much. I think we can, come to the end of the session. By anyway, it seriously it was really informative and also insightful. Uh, Professor Dr. Lawrence, Associate Professor Dr. Lawrence, thank you very much. I think based on the question that from the viewers, we can conclude that most of them are really not into with the literature review. So I think the next webinar I can my suggestion maybe no Dr. Lawrence himself can do a topic or presentation related with literature review, more in depth related with the literature review. So I think those register for this webinar or view the webinar today, they will get more ideas how to write a proper literature review. All right. So thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
viewers. Yes.
Thank you very much.
So anything you
Bye.
would like to say? Yes. Thank you. And viewers, we have an what is that evaluation form feedback from about this webinar. So we will post it in a while, and please fill up that so you will entitled to get a e-certificate by the end of this session. All right. So thank you very much, and that's all. See you in the next webinar. Take care.
Thank you.